Now before you cut out your rib template, your fuselage, you're going to want to probably make your rib template. As you can see, I went ahead and filled out the rib template, or cut out the rib template. Notice that you leave the dotted line here for making your rib template, because the dotted line represents the sheeting that's going to go around the outside. But when you make your ribs, you don't want to make your ribs the size of the sheeting, or otherwise now you've got a little fatter wing than you need. Not that it's a huge big deal, but I would just cut out the solid black line all the way around the template and leave the dotted line on the page. That's just representing sheeting that you'll do later on. And then when we go to cut out the fuselage, you can line up your hatch marks, or your spar marks, right here and here, and then line up your tail. So everything's right on the black line of the fuselage, and if things look good, that means you did a good job cutting out the template and traced it down onto this. As you can see, I wrote the pat bottom. This is our pattern. So I'm going to use this piece of wood to cut out all my ribs, because I know that'll be the most uniform for everything. You don't want to cut a rib, then use the next rib, then use the next rib, because you get like a growing sensation, and by the last piece of wood, you've cut 10 pieces of wood. The 10th piece is way bigger than the first piece, because you're growing every time you trace and cut, depending on how you cut it, unless you're cutting the inside out. So it's best to just make one pattern, use that pattern for every rib that you're making, and that way every rib will come out as close to the front one close to all together the same as possible. And then and on your rib template, make sure you put your center line on. You just want to put a center line on your rib. That way when you're tracing out your ribs onto other pieces of wood, you can go ahead and mark your centers, and you won't have to find the center of every piece. So basically, I'm going to take whatever piece of wood I have I'm putting on here, and I'll trace out the outline of my pattern. So you just take your pen, you go around everything, trace everything, and then at the very end of it, as long as you haven't moved your pattern, just take where the marks are that you made there, mark a center there, and mark a center in between your notch there. Just use a tape measure and get your 1/4 inch on both ends, and then you just take a straight edge and just connect the dots. So you put your straight edge down. So like I said, after you get your pattern done, mark your center line on it. So after you trace your pattern, then you can also use the center marks on the thing by marking them here and here, and then just draw a line, and you don't have to measure every single piece that you're doing for the center line. Another way you can do this is you get your rib template, and you can, if you got the wood and you want to spare it, and you're one of the lucky people that have a bandsaw type thing, a scroll saw, you can just stack 8 pieces of wood, because you're going to want 8 of one kind and 2 of the 1/4 inch for your wing tips. But you can just stack all 8 pieces or 10 pieces together in a square, just stack all your wood, and take that template, draw it out on top, and then just cut all 10 pieces out at once on a scroll saw. So that's the nicest way to do it. But I don't have a bandsaw or a scroll saw, so I am one of the lucky ones who get to actually take my X-Acto blade and carve each piece out. And if you really want to, you could take your 1/4 inch stock that you know you're going to be using in your grooves just for your template, and make sure it fits in there nice. If it stands in there nice and tight and snug, that's how you want it. On the front, you want the front part of your template to be perfectly flat with the top part of the 1/4 by 1/4 spar, because you're going to have a piece of 1/16 that goes right up and over the spar to stop there, and that's where it'll pick up the cap strip, and the cap strip will finish off the run to the back, and the cap strip will finish off the run to the back. And I think that's about it. So you don't make your cuts too big for the slots, because you don't want this thing to be sloppy in there. You want them to be nice and snug. So once you get your 1/4 inch fit, that's what you go with. Cut each piece to that.